Hello, my name's Tom. What's your name?
Hi Tom, my name's Jen.
Jen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
How's your day today?
So far, so good. It's definitely been busy, but still a good day.
What are the things that you're doing that made you busy today?
So part of my job, I'm in the middle, I'm a crisis advocate, but I'm also transitioning to a new position here in Golden Hills. So my day actually started out with having to meet with clients at the courthouse. I accompany them as emotional support for court injunctions. It was for granting 2 restraining orders, which is really important for providing safety measures for individuals that are experiencing domestic violence. From there, met with a handful of clients here. My new position involves educating people in the public. So I was even over at NWTC with a resource table for a little over an hour today, discussing with students the different resources that Golden Hills provides.
Are there any other jobs you do currently besides here?
I do Lyft drive part-time outside of here. The nice thing about that is it's flexible. So if I have heavier hours during my week, like my full-time job, I can determine whether or not if I want to drive as many hours over the weekend.
So you said you work here and then you volunteer or work at TC as well, right?
No. Okay. Going over to TC is part of the prevention coordinator position. I go into different schools, anywhere from middle schools, high schools, colleges. I'll be going into businesses. I'll even be educating people in the jails about healthy relationships and recognizing warning signs of domestic violence.
So you're just bringing awareness to your almost surroundings.
Absolutely, yes.
So you work pretty much every day then?
Yes.
So I want to ask you a few questions. So these few next questions will be about your positioning. So what topics you work with currently? We mentioned domestic abuse, right?
Yes. So what we do is we work with clients that are experiencing domestic violence. So it's anywhere from people who are in extreme levels of crisis. We do have an emergency shelter here. So I will assess their needs and find out if they have major immediate safety concerns to where they need a safe, secure facility to be able to house themselves and their family. Basically, like when you're a crisis advocate, you're like the front line of anyone calling in here. So we will end up assessing people's needs. It might just be just through our outreach facility that we help them, which that's with anything from applying for different housing programs or helping them fill out paperwork for like no contact order lists, temporary restraining orders, harassment orders. That's kind of on the court end of things, attending the injunctions with them and preparing them for kind of what the court system has for them and what it looks like when they're in court. We will assist people with financial assistance if they're needing assistance with like first month's rent and security deposit, if that's usually a pretty big barrier for people leaving domestic violence situations because sometimes somebody is the sole provider and they just don't have the financial means of doing that on their own. We get donations from individuals, so we're able to provide like personal hygiene items, diapers, wipes, anything down to laundry detergent, even household goods. A lot of the things that we don't have here, we will provide like a verification letter, and then they can utilize places like St. Vincent de Paul or Salvation Army to go and get furniture items or any other needed items that they have that we don't have the capacity of storing here. And that's just kind of a few things. So we also provide support group. There's an in-house therapist. So tonight, one of the things I do is I assist with the children's portion of that. We always try to do meaningful activities with them and do a children's support group as well. So it's another hat.
So what made you want to work here?
I decided that this was a heartfelt place for me because I am personally a survivor of domestic violence. And that was one of the major deciding factors. And even when I first started here, I didn't realize how many things Golden Hills had to offer. I work with an amazing team of people that really work hard to make sure that they decrease barriers for people that are in that situation. So that is why I have stuck around, and I keep finding new additional jobs here within the company because it's a great place to work.
Yeah, I also want to mention at this end, any point you have questions for me, you can ask as well.
Okay, sounds good.
So you work at Golden House, so what is the purpose and vision of Golden House?
Ooh. I should know that by heart, but I do not. It is.
No problem.
Oh, now I feel terrible that I don't know the actual statement. But
That's okay. Well, in your opinion, or from your personal experiences, what do you think?
a general idea is that we are trying to assist people experience domestic violence, and not only in doing that, we are trying to like also educate the public and in trying to like diminish or completely eradicate domestic violence in general. Like that is our absolute mission, is to try to make sure that it doesn't happen. So it's a very generic version, so I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. So regarding domestic abuse, I often hear that it's not, or it is a norm to keep things to yourself, especially not trying to be a gender bias as anything, but specifically women, they're often told to be kept quiet or not express. I guess vice versa with males too. If males they show their emotions or men talks about it, they're seen as weak because they're supposed to be masculine and strong.
Right, right, absolutely. The Golden House does serve all populations. So a lot of people, they actually do feel like they think that it's just a women's shelter, like for women and children, but it's for men and women. Statistically, obviously, like it's proven that women do experience it more than men do. However, even though lower percentages of males, like we know for a fact that a lot of situations like that go undocumented, unreported, based off of exactly what you said, where men are typically raised with the mentality of that they either can't be abused or that it's a shameful experience to be going through that. They'll be embarrassed. They won't want to talk to anyone outside of their own self based on the fact of the different emotions that come along with that. So it is difficult. We don't know the exact numbers, but it is absolutely real that men are abused just as well as women are.
So I'm just trying to process some thoughts quick. So in reference or in correlation to that, do you feel like uh, culture culture of the beliefs or I guess spirituality can influence that as well?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Especially when you're raised with certain beliefs, whether it's cultural, whether it's religion based, there are different expectations that come along with all of that. And a lot of times, you'll have certain traditions that are in place of like that you don't believe in divorce, that they expect families to be together, that it literally can take a hierarchy of people involved within your local community that may make that decision for you based on what culture you come from. So it is very important to recognize the differences between that when you walk into any appointment, because you may not realize certain things that are pressures on those people as to the reason why they might not be able to immediately leave, which can very, very, very much be influential in their situations. So you don't want them to compromise anything with their own religious beliefs or their own culture when discussing, different options or avenues with them. It's not for us to pressure that. It's obviously just it's for their decision, but you also want to be sensitive to that so you're not making them feel, put out in any way.
So in a way, like being empathetic and compassionate for them.
Absolutely.
So I guess it is often heard, or I guess more on the social media side. I guess it's the things we hear, at least from my personal experience, I would hear that many, I guess, people in the community were I guess, spouses or I guess married couples would stay in an abusive relationship only because of the child. And what are their opinions about that?
I mean, I understand how that can be a huge barrier for people. They want to be able to create a situation that the family stays together. It's not easy to raise a child on your own. It's not easy when you leave a situation to even work through co-parenting and what that looks like, especially, trying to communicate about appointment times and planning ahead for those things. So a lot of people will try to avoid that as much as possible and oftentimes keep themselves in a pretty toxic environment. They may also think that even though the child might not be present at the time of any levels of abuse, and abuse can look at like a lot of forms. It's not just physical. It can be, emotional, mental. People can utilize financial abuse is another one, So there's lots of facets to the levels of abuse that someone can be experiencing, and they may experience one or more forms at the same time. When people have the general mentality of that, like the child may not have been around during like an explosive incident, I always like to remind them that like as human beings, we kind of can walk into a room and feel an energy. And when you're in a cycle of abuse, a lot of that time is spent in like a walking on eggshells kind of moment where you're just trying to avoid that eventual explosion in whatever form that comes. If it's, somebody getting in a yelling match, or even if it does go physical, or somebody goes and drains a bank account and goes and blows it all at the casino. Okay, those are all forms of abuse. But that eggshell stage, that tension, that can be felt, even by kids, and it can affect, the many different levels with them at various ages. They can become withdrawn, they can have anxiety, it can change, sleeping and eating patterns, so there's multiple ways that it can affect children too by staying in a situation, but often people think it's not something that they've experienced because they haven't been there for the full-blown explosion.
So you're saying the way that environment that the children are in can affect their upbringing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's tough sometimes too, because a lot of times when you see someone who is abusive, it's something that they've learned. They may have been raised in an abusive household. And sometimes people think like just because they're not being physical, they might only be utilizing words that are hurtful. But they don't think that they're as abusive as a home that they grew up in because they're not physically hitting or harming anyone. But they are still carrying forward negative impacts by, manipulating someone with words, calling names, degrading someone. Any of those types of things are still a form of abuse. And as children grow up, it ends up being a continued cycle because it's something that they saw and learned growing up. So it's important to make sure that you can maintain a healthy relationship, so that way that's not passing forward to generations.
So in a sense, you're saying that the way what they I guess what any sort of abuse that or negative things that they experience while growing up, they think it's normal, and then when because they're children, as it influences them, as it can influence them as they grow up, they think it's normal.
Sure. It ends up normalizing it because if they're around it on a daily basis, let's say even they get out of the home, but they end up in their own relationship and some of these same red flags show up, they might not think of it as a big deal because it's something that they grew up with as a child. So then it just continues that cycle of abuse.
Because I want to add one to that. So I guess more in the social media world. So there would often be like videos about normalizing cheating, or people making jokes about cheating and or whatsoever. But then, what do you think
About like cheating in general, or like the social media aspect of it?
I guess social media is making a norm that like having this many people is a normal.
Sure.
It's okay, or I guess cheating is okay.
And I think social media has a lot more of an impact than people realize.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will put outward that their relationship seems good just to kind of do that face front.
Yeah.
And then it can also be used as a manipulation tactic. Like, so let's say somebody assumes someone is cheating, but they don't even have proof of it. They might blast them on Facebook, or, make a Snapchat about it and put it out there to all of their friends and family. They might say to that person, like, well, I know you're doing this, and if you don't admit it, I'm just going to keep posting things. So, it can be a manipulation tactic as well. As far as like people changing the expectations, like when it comes to cheating and normalizing that, even not recognizing that they're not, speaking upon the other half of realizing how hurtful and what type of effects that has when you're in a committed relationship and there's been an agreement that you're not going to see other people, and that's a violation of a boundary, and that's not a healthy thing. So to normalize that, it's no different than normalizing any level of abuse or being around that for so long. If a circle of friends decide that it's not that big of a deal, that, it's something fun that they can do on the side and doesn't mean anything, odds are anybody in that same circle that's witnessing those things are going to adapt that same feeling. So it can be very, very harmful.
So this is a side that so it seems to me like that they might have some insecurities or that may cause them to just manipulate that person. Maybe not intentionally, but I guess at the time they don't realize it.
Sure. I mean, it still can still do some damage when they aren't. You might not recognize that you're doing certain things, but the reality of it is if it's harming another individual, and then they bring it to your attention, at that point you still would need to self-assess, and if you don't make any changes in that behavior and continue that pattern, then that's still a choice that you're making to continue an abusive behavior. Like if you're not, even if you're not working on your own insecurities, then you end up passing along those traumas that you have within onto another individual. Whether it comes in the form of jealousy, which can easily escalate into rage, and there's a lot of different forms of it. Even if you, and a lot of times I think people who are manipulating may not even be aware of their own actions. People who are abusive may not be aware. They might not think that they're doing anything wrong until it reaches a legal standpoint that the officers are knocking on the door and saying, hey, we're taking you to jail because this incident escalated to the point of throwing something or what have you. And that's typically what we see, is that it takes some big major blowout like that before people will realize that how they're acting is inappropriate.
Sorry for the process of these slides.
So yeah.
I had like a reference to about sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay, no worries.
So you mentioned that you were also a victim of abuse.
Yes.
If you don't mind sharing, would you be comfortable sharing it?
I'll share part of it. Basically, I stayed in a 15-year relationship. It didn't. It's when you talk about it out loud, it sounds pretty typical. There's a lot of where it didn't start out that way. It was very slowly, gradually, and it would be very few small, minor incidences that you kind of chalked up to it, just not being that big of a deal. But in hindsight, it was all the red flags that were popping up to show exactly what it could escalate to. So it was anywhere from like verbal, mental, emotional. Those were the beginning stages, and it did graduate to physical in some pretty severe situations. Because this person was a parent, I never wanted to see them go to jail, so I tried to not get law enforcement involved because I recognized that could impact their ability to either keep or apply for additional jobs, to be able to be involved in their children's lives. Like there were a lot of things that I chose not to report over because I didn't want to see someone that I care about have to go through further struggles, even though it was their choice that they made to become violence, whether it be with words or physically. It was something that we would break up and get back together, which in domestic violence is very, very typical. It takes up to 7 to 10 times of somebody leaving their partner to finally actually leave a domestic violence situation. And mine was very stereotypical of that. There were times that I can honestly say that I was lucky to leave certain situations alive. I'm very grateful to still be here because there's a lot of people that they don't get that chance. So it took numerous incidences, a few hospitalizations, feeling very isolated from friends and family because I would still go back to this individual, and of course they're dealing with all the trauma from that, which could be very frustrating and harmful for them to see. So it was even after ending the relationship with him, things were and it's very common that things will escalate when you go to end a relationship. And I didn't do any safety planning with people. I didn't do any of those things. So kind of felt blindsided when this person just would randomly show up at my home in the middle of the night, very, very unsafe situations. So, having the ability to help people safety plan now, that's a big part of my job. But it took numerous times of him going to court over other women even that he was abusive towards. So now he's got repeat offender scenarios on his end, but thankfully I am no longer being harassed. It's been a couple of years since we've been together, so I'm grateful for the fact that, unfortunately, for the experiences that he's gone through, jail time involved, you name it. He has sought out therapy, is my understanding, through his family. But beyond that, it took some pretty major things to get him to stop being violent, not only toward me, but to other women. And I mean, I wish the best for him, but in the same sense, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to still be here, and I recognize that those were choices that he made. So,
Sorry to go through that.
thank you.
You have a very, very powerful.
I appreciate that.
Sorry. Just
No worries.
that's such a thought. Should I think of both things at the same time? What are some beliefs that Golden House has in other specific clients? But I forgot that you already mentioned it. So,
Oh, that's okay. Say it one more time. I might have things to add.
yeah, some beliefs that Golden House has in order to best help their clients.
So actually, that is a really good question, because it is. Because what we do is like we are an open door policy. So even if a person calls us because we're listed as a local shelter, if we aren't necessarily like, let's say they're not experiencing domestic violence, we will still help them like get in touch with whatever resources can assist them. So it is very, very open door. We work hand in hand with a lot of other community partners, and we've got a lot of resources at our fingertips. So we don't just turn someone away. We try to make sure that they're getting the help that they need. Another really important thing is even sometimes people have to come to us, and this is like for appointments to do no contact orders, okay? When there's a domestic dispute, they will, like officers will put in effect a no contact order. When there's a domestic incident, the victim, if they don't want that no contact order in place, they then have to come to us and we will go over domestic violence education. We'll do a risk assessment for them. We'll discuss safety planning. And then we fill out a statement piece with them. They go file that at the courthouse. It's seen before a judge. The judge ultimately decides whether or not the no contact order is lifted. I always look at it when those people come in for those appointments, we take everyone at face value. They may say it's a complete misunderstanding, which it might be. I can't assume ever with a person that it's not what they're saying. So whether it's a person coming in to be assessed for the shelter, for housing, what have you, we take people at face value for their situation. With no contact orders, somebody might come in and they're just angry at the fact that they have to even sit there for the hour and go through that information. So I always just reiterate to people that this information may or may not apply to you. If it doesn't apply to your situation, like I'm still required to go through it, but it's at least arming you with information that if you do know somebody that needs our services, or for any reason your safety concerns change, you feel free to come right back here and we can provide you with some help, or a friend or a family member that needs help. Because a lot of times, if people have a no contact order lifted and then suddenly their abuser attacks them again, they might feel guilt or shame and not want to come back here for help because they went in and purposely got a no contact order lifted. As long as they recognize that it doesn't matter how many times they go through that, how many times they attempt to leave or go back, that we are always an open door here for them, that's probably one of the biggest things that I try to have clients take away from any appointment that I do.
So in a way, I guess it's what I'm saying because it's in general. I guess it's because we look at the clients for the present, not based on what they have experienced or went through.
Yes. And obviously, if they want to share their story, they can. We can talk about all of that with them. We're strictly confidential here, so that information doesn't go anywhere. We are not mandated reporters. So I will lead with that with people so they recognize that anything that they discuss is not being turned around and reported to, say CPS or anything along those lines.
So I forgot, but what type of programs is going on? So you mentioned there's outreach programs and goal setting programs as well. Or...
Yeah, so there's two main ones. It would be our emergency shelter, and then our outreach. At our outreach facility, there's a handful of different advocates that work in both. So it starts with the crisis advocates, which is like the front line. So, and even the weekend and overnight advocates, they're fully trained to be able to staff because we are 24 hours available on either our text line or our phone. So that way people can call in, even if it's just an event or if they need to schedule an appointment, all of those things can even happen at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we will assess people for what their needs are. There's different programs here within outreach that is anything from our therapy, which therapy can be individual one-on-one sessions. It can be our support groups. There is an adult support group, and then there's a children's support group. We do typically have a children's advocate that will also work one-on-one with children. At this time, we don't specifically have that role filled because we are like a downsized being in our temporary facility. But when we move back over to the university in our newly built building, we will definitely be seeking to hire another full-time children's advocate. We have a housing program, so it's called Rapid Rehousing. They assist clients in not only applying for, but obtaining housing, anything from all the way down. We'll get donations of furniture from people and rent a U-Haul and help load it into their house. Like, it's, yeah. Then we have, like, there's different fundraising programs that are here. There are people that assist, like my newest position is prevention coordinator. So what that is going out into the public, like I said, anywhere from schools, jails, businesses, you name it, and doing basic education and talking to people about what they could do to prevent being in a domestic violence situation. And that does go hand in hand with certain fundraising events too. I think I touched base on most of it.
So, regarding the program, so this is a what if situation. Would it be possible for like I guess employees to be in the programs as well?
Yes. Typically, I think what would end up taking place is if they were involved directly in the programs themselves, they might be referred to work like with another surrounding area, domestic violence shelter, just for confidentiality and like lack of like what I'm trying to think of the right words for that.
No problem.
Conflict of interest, being that like if you worked with your coworkers, we like if something arose while you were here, I do believe that they would assess like if there were major safety concerns, because obviously like if you had somebody that was stalking you or that was intending upon harming you and they knew your place of employment, we wouldn't want to put anyone else at risk. So that would definitely be a discussion. But as far as like other services, I think that they would most likely refer outside of here just so you could still get the help. I mean, maybe not necessarily the housing part of it, but if it was like therapy, things along those lines, they might have someone else work with you from a different area.
And so, what career accomplishments? What career sorry, what career accomplishments makes you most proud? Or I guess if you want to mention a few, that works as well.
Okay, I would say obtaining my new position of prevention coordinator is a pretty big one for me. I did not go. I took a handful of classes a few years ago, but I did not start towards my actual program degree until 2017. So I was a very late start student. I did not start college until I was 37 years old. That was after 25 years of bartending experience and deciding that I needed to change my career. And it just was something that was very heartfelt for me. So once I received my associate degree, and then I went on to UWGB to obtain my bachelor's in psychology. And then when I was applying for jobs, this was always a place that was heartfelt to me based off of the experiences that I've had. So when I started here, it was that I was working another job. I was actually working two jobs. I was bartending at one place and serving tables at another. And then I started working here as a third shift, like an overnight advocate. And I did that for a handful of months. And then a position opened up during the day for a crisis advocate. So I applied for that position and came into the day shift part. And then last year, there was an opening for the prevention coordinator. So I put my name in the hat for that. Like I say, it's pretty neat to have the different experience behind all of it and have the knowledge and know-how. The prevention coordinator position I'm excited about because one of my future goals is to be a part-time instructor. So by having it under my belt of doing public speaking and actually being in all of these schools and being an educator, being trained to be able to do these things is actually really beneficial for future goals of mine. So very grateful to have been offered that position here.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
You're a speaker, you're an instructor, you're a coordinator as well.
Yeah, I keep busy.
So, how many years is school? 6 years?
No, actually, for my bachelor's, it was the standard 4. I was, for the programming that I was in, I was able to go to NWTC, and my associate degree, a lot of those credits transferred over to UWGB. So it still only took me, because of the amount that transferred, it only took me 2 additional years to complete my bachelor's, so it was a total of 4 years for that. I have yet to go on for my master's. That's the next step.
Okay, because I thought with the amount of jobs that you're having, you would need a master's degree level.
No, actually for this, even an associate degree in human services, especially if you have experience working with the public on certain demographics, it might be based off of an internship that you have that experience, may qualify you to be a crisis advocate here. A lot of times we will get interns that come in that will end up obtaining a position here just because they enjoy the atmosphere and they like the work that they do. That's honestly how we've gotten a lot of employees here. So
I was considering maybe in the future maybe working here because right now I'm currently at NWTC.
Okay.
Human services and then be graduating getting my degree in the summer, then marketing in December, and then transfer to GP this fall, and then finish up my degree from there.
That's awesome.
Needed and maybe master's, but according to what you say, you don't really need a master's degree to.
Not for these specific positions, but like even for future goals of mine, further out, I will need a master's for that. And I'm a firm believer that additional education never harms anyone. So I just took a break because I was working 2 to 3 jobs and doing full-time school for 4 years, so it was a lot. When I go back, it'll be on a part-time basis. So you're in the human services program?
Yeah.
That's the one that I did, and I really enjoyed it. Shelly was the program director at that time, so I'm assuming she might be in charge of this class. So hi, Shelly. But yeah, she did a lot of really great hands-on things. One of my favorite classes that I didn't realize how implementable it would be. It was a class solely on doing paperwork. Okay, and a lot of people are like, this is ridiculous. But she's the one that made that class, and she'll tell the story to people based on the fact that she went to school straight through for her master's, and then when she obtained and secured a position in her field, she didn't really know how to do all of that. So to do formal intake of a client, process all of that, and I assure you, half of my job is documenting. So it's important to know those things and recognize that that's a very, very essential part to this any job in the human services field. There's a lot of documentation to it. So I'm grateful, and I love the fact that I went to TC beforehand. Saved me money and gave me a lot of hands-on tools that I had a great experience at GB too, but it was just a very different perspective, and I was grateful that I went the route that I did.
Do you know Terry?
I do not know Terry. Nope, I don't think, because I went there from 2007 to 2017 to 2019. So, yeah. I think Shelley might be the only one left out of the program there that I had.
He's definitely teaching pretty well, I believe.
Who's that? Shelley? Yeah.
So, how would your previous coworkers describe you?
My previous coworkers?
Yes.
Before starting here at Golden House?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm sure that there's mixed reviews. I worked in a lot of dive bars, so it was situations that I got along with some people and some not. You were able to it was not as professional, I guess, as an office kind of situation. But that was also a huge factor in why I chose to change careers. So there may be some people that really liked me, and there may be some people that didn't. Especially in the bar industry, people were not shy to express how they felt. So I assure you, there were some days that there were very colorful words used towards me. But I've also had places that I've worked for that they know that I'm a hard worker and that I don't know, I'll kind of help out the team in whatever way I can. But I've also, like I said, worked at places. One of the last bartending places that I had was the deciding factor for me in realizing that I wanted to change my career and recognizing that if I stayed working in job positions like I was, that it was going to be the same thing no matter what. Like any small mom and pop type business, walking in, there might be somebody you don't get along with the greatest, but I also didn't deserve to be abused within my job, and that was what was taking place at that time. So I just decided to put my nose in the books, and I stayed there for the 4 years I was in school, and switched places eventually to bartend at another place part time. But that was pretty much the end of me bartending full time.
So you're saying that you have more potential that you could do better.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate you putting it that way.
That's a very strong aspect of being open-minded.
Yes. Yes.
I guess it's just a society knows it's really hard for people to be closed-minded. I want to be open-minded, even though that may seem kind of biased, but
it is very true, and especially even that abrupt of a change in environment. When I went from bartending and serving tables, and then when I started here, I started as a third shift, like an overnight advocate.
Yeah.
So I was essentially the only employee there. So to then switch from that to an office position, and I not only had not worked a day shift position in over 15 years, the last day shift job that I had was working construction, that I was the only woman on a team and got to hear a lot of crass talk throughout the day. Definitely a very different environment than being in an office. And if you had a conversation with my direct supervisor from here at Golden House, you would recognize that, like, as she will flat out tell you that there were times I went into her office and I was like, I am struggling. I was struggling with adjusting to the different personalities and trying to make sure like where I fit in, and it definitely was an adjustment period. But I was very open and communicated about that because I felt that was important. I didn't want it to seem like it was affecting my job, and also felt like someone who had worked more hand in hand with the other coworkers of mine may have insight on how to transition a little bit smoother to that. So I'm very grateful and glad that I spoke on it, so we were on a little better understanding.
So I apologize, but I forgot. I just remember my question relating to school.
Sure.
So I mentioned I was going to go to GP for my bachelor's degrees. So I was, and then once I know that I was thinking more that helping people more the housing, maybe domestic abuse.
Sure.
Very, very interesting. I want to just get to know more of this reasons why they behave the way they behave. I guess it's the overall dynamics of domestic abuse and
Absolutely, absolutely. And even I look at it like even if you were to move into just a general therapist position, okay, not necessarily specified in domestic violence, by having that knowledge, you'll be able to better pinpoint and serve any clientele that you have. Especially when you might have clients that come in and it might not be them experiencing it, it might be another loved one of theirs. And talking through, what emotions they're carrying with that and how to best be supportive for that other person. Like all of the knowledge that you're obtaining from here will be useful in a lot of different avenues.
yeah, because I was looking at some of the golden house information online. It's a lot of knowledge.
It's a lot. I wish it was something that could be completely eradicated. Obviously, that's one of our goals, but the reality of it is unfortunately there will most likely always be a need for places like this. But just grateful to have the opportunity to assist people with those resources so they don't have to struggle any longer than they already have.
Yeah, so switching topics here. So this next big question will be about your culture biases. So can you tell me a little about your culture and belief systems?
Oh, sure. I was raised here in Green Bay. My family at the time like my parents didn't divorce until I was 18 years old. So I was raised, like they did separate for a little bit at that time when I was in high school. My family, I was raised as Catholic, but they weren't like devout Catholics. I would say we were more, consider ourselves like Christian. We were very much so a family that the only time we would go to church was for major holidays, which was pretty much pressured by my grandparents. And they'd sit closest to the back, so we'd be the first one out the door. not overly religious, but enough of a belief system. I was Catholic school through my sophomore year of high school, so definitely a family that believes in God. That it wasn't enough though, like where they didn't like my parents. They did stay married, like for the sake of us children. It wasn't until my brother was like 16 that they got divorced, and then kind of working through the motions of what that looked like. Now it's basically like a big blended family, but we're all still in the same general vicinity. But that definitely did affect me, as far as how I made even some of my own personal choices with relationships. That's, it was kind of a big factor. So I think generations before me, my family wouldn't necessarily believe in divorce. And it hit my family kind of as a big shock because there's not a huge history of divorce in my family in general. So my parents were one of the first couples to get divorced in our family. But that also, I married at the age of 21, was married for 7 years when I got separated, but also divorced at the 10-year marker. And I think I was more prone to leaving a situation that wasn't necessarily healthy for me, and recognizing that my faith may have been very different than predecessors in my family. That I wasn't going to let my faith get in the way of making sure that I was safe or not, emotionally or mentally abused to stay in a situation like that just based off of religious beliefs. So obviously, everyone is a little bit different, but in my family, it was something that it wasn't where you were shunned or anything if that was the decision that you made. And some people do face that with their religious or cultural beliefs.
So currently now, do you still believe in God?
I do, yes.
Do you feel like having that faith in God helped you to leave it or get through any situations that you might have experienced?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I felt for me it was a very, very positive thing. Like there were years that I did not attend church, that I didn't, and I don't even regularly now. But I had friends that were very highly involved in the church, and during some of my darkest moments, even reaching out to them, they were very uplifting and very supportive. So in a very non-judgmental way. So even though I have faith in God, I don't really have very strict guidelines. I'm pretty open to other people's belief systems. I don't ever want my own beliefs to negate someone else's because I don't feel that anyone has the right to do that. So even though I have my own beliefs, I'm still very open to other people's. My sister is an atheist, and I support and recognize that with her. It's important that everyone is seen and heard and felt in there, and they have their own rights. They have their own thoughts and feelings. And I do feel sometimes that like organized religion it's like a game of who's the best and who's right. And I don't necessarily feel that anyone's right. I feel everything's right. So whatever's right for that person is right for them. So, but it definitely did help me. And especially when a lot of times, like when you get in situations where you're mentally manipulated, it can cause really like depressive and anxiety-ridden feelings. So sometimes people can spiral, and a lot of those times I was very uplifted by my own feelings of faith that assisted me in not hitting like a rock bottom kind of moment, or not, I think also my religion, like my background of religion assisted me in not becoming suicidal, okay, which is a pretty big deal for a lot of people. You might have those thoughts that are there just because of the moment that you're in, but based on what your belief system is, that may be something that greatly impacts your decision on whether or not you would actually attempt.
So, what are some biases that you think others have about you and or your culture and or
Well, I've experienced a handful of things. I think that sometimes, like when you look at, and don't get me wrong, I have definitely witnessed things that like it's assuming that like all white people are racist or have certain tendencies. And I do understand where a lot of those thoughts and feelings come from. I absolutely do. I really truthfully have a difficult time in some of the areas that I've lived are smaller towns. So I believe that I believe that white privilege is a thing. To have conversations like that with other people from my same background, they may completely disagree with me. But I've also witnessed a lot of different forms of racism to varying cultures, and some of the things are very, very brutal. So I recognize like what can take place. So um, there's been times, even when Lyft driving, that I've had people make comments, like, but I try to not take it personally because I recognize that it's that mentality is based off of negative experiences that they've had from other people. And unfortunately, like not even unfortunately, I don't feel like as someone who's white that I've experienced half of, not even a quarter of scenarios that are like that. So to be put down or what have you, it's not right. But I'm also not one that's being attacked for having a different culture because I have been the majority my entire life. So like I don't feel like I don't know. I think that the bias comes in and they may assume that I'm just like any other white person out there, like that I don't care, that I don't recognize that people deal with racism, and I think that's probably the biggest one that I face. Even working here, you know, you get people that come in and they're very skeptical because they just assume maybe that I had parents that paid for my college education, that I had parents that paid for a place for me to live, you know, even after getting out from high school. You know, there's a lot of situations that are like that, and it's an assumption. But I understand why people would think that. It's just not necessarily the case in every given scenario. So
So you're saying that biases can be formed based on what people hear on social media, or there's like
all of it,
history or
history, the news. It could be a conversation that you have just with somebody that you met based off of an experience they had being out in the public. It's unfortunate that there are a lot of situations, and you look at like this general area. You know, this is Green Bay area. Yes, it's growing and it's becoming more diversified. But I was born and raised here, and I was born and raised here and watched how things have changed over the years. I remember, you know, not seeing a lot of people from different cultures as I grew up here in Green Bay. So it is great that it is becoming more diversified, but you still have people who can be very stuck in an old school mentality of things, and that's just unacceptable. You know, it truthfully is. You take bigger cities and it's a melting pot of people, and I think people lose sight of that because they're not as used to seeing that here. It's getting bigger, and hopefully people become more accepting.
And so the next few questions will be about the thoughts prior to working where you are currently or in the, I guess, in the domestic police population. So what were some of your biases before working in this population?
I guess that's a good question. One of the biases that I had maybe that's really tough because I don't really feel that I necessarily maybe one of the biases that I had was based off of that I thought the majority of what the work here was with just an emergency shelter. I didn't really realize how much people do, like how much outreach provides, and I didn't recognize how even like once I've been in this position, there are certain aspects of it. Like I try really hard to. I don't know another language. Okay, so recognizing that like I have plenty of clients that come in that I will need an interpreter for. We do provide that service, but you would be surprised as to how many places that you go to that don't, including like the courthouse. If you don't have something scheduled for an actual court appointment, even for the filing of the paperwork, we will go with clients to file because we can at least provide translation for them. Otherwise, they would have no idea of how they're even filling out paperwork. So I guess I came in with a bias, thinking that like all of those things were set in place for people, and not recognizing that there's a need, like there's even more need for, especially for people that they're in this area. This might be their first time experiencing or having to do any of these court processes. Like they need help, so they also need to understand what's going on. I unfortunately, like I said, did not take the time to learn a second language, so but at least we provide additional assistance.
So I'm just trying to read the questions.
You're fine.
So did you have any concerns regarding the population before you got to this position?
Uh, I was grateful for taking certain classes in my college career that assisted me. I guess my one major concern was like coming in and having my own personal experiences be triggered by hearing stories from people who are currently playing. Recognizing that it's important to like lean on your team to talk things out, kind of debrief on certain appointments that might be more strenuous. Uh, like that was probably one of my biggest concerns coming in. That and overall safety concerns. There's been heightened situations where you may have like an abuser show up to our secure facility. Our former building was outreach and the shelter all in one building, and there were like it's that recognizing after some of my experiences that people are more than willing to go to the nth degree if they are really that abusive and they hit that rage point that they will attempt to do whatever they can to harm that person. So that's why we create a secure facility, cameras surrounding the whole place. But even at that, you will still have people that will try to make their way in there, and it's that it can be very concerning. Unfortunately, people who can that they can reach that capacity, and we see how that obviously can end sometimes. People can even get killed, So that was a big concern. We do try to safeguard as much as possible. Put certain things in place. You're not really ever leaving the building alone, or at least somebody is keeping an eye on you on cameras when that takes place. Even you only give your first name when speaking with the police, just to kind of safeguard in case if your name ends up in a police report. When I attended court injunctions, I don't wear my name tag. You try to be very aware of where the abuser is on your way out of the courtroom, so if they can recognize your vehicle. We try to make sure that you're removing anything that may be distinguishing and showing them like what vehicle you are or who you are. So that was probably one of my bigger concerns because I know what level people can take it to, but they've got some pretty good security measures in place.
So you mentioned, I guess, one of the concern was that the fear you're going into can trigger experiences of past trauma. So if you're comfortable, if it's appropriate, would you mind telling me what you think? I guess you can tell others how to cope with that or how to deal with it. Like, what kind of fear triggers some of the past memories or trauma?
Sure. Like when you're discussing with someone, if it is something that's triggering to you, one thing I always try to remind myself is that they're the ones that are currently in their moment of crisis. It's not my personal crisis.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a very empathetic person, it's difficult sometimes to not shed a tear when you hear some of those stories, but it's recognizing that they're seeking out support. So it's more important for you at that time to recognize that you are that support. And if you're able to listen to certain stories, yes, some of them can be very, very tough. You hear some of them and you may need sometimes to ask them for 5 minutes and step out of the room. It might be emotionally for you something that, like, let's say you just had a really rough week and it all hits a point and then this person's story just kind of teeters it over the edge. Typically, we can go to one of our coworkers and say, hey, guess what? Like, my balloon's pretty full. I need to tag team on this. Can you jump in this appointment so that way I can kind of just cool off a little bit? One of the ones that was actually tough for me when I first started is we assist people because like sometimes instead of children, they may have pets that they're not trying to leave in an abusive situation. They don't have anywhere to go. A lot of places won't accept pets. They're coming into shelter. There's a lot of shelters that don't take pets. So we worked with like a fostering program that works specifically with sexual assault survivors and DV survivors in finding homes to temporarily place their animals with. So I had to meet one of my clients at the shelter for her to surrender her dog over to the person in charge of this fostering program. and just I'm a pet owner. Like
Yeah.
so to see this woman go through the emotions of that, like yes, I got a little teary eyed, and I did shed a tear with her. But it's okay to do on occasion, but recognizing that you're the one to be their support system is really, really important. But also it's okay. I took that opportunity to normalize with her and explain like normally we don't talk a lot about our own personal lives. So like I'm not gonna sit down with her and be like, oh, I have 3 dogs and like give her my half of my life story. I just simply put it as in like, okay, I have pets too, and I know how important they are to a family. So I can totally feel what you're going through right now. But just keep in mind that this is temporary, and you're doing this to put yourself in a lot better situation. And reiterating to them that it doesn't feel the greatest sometimes to come in and have to do all of these steps, and it feels like it takes forever, but that they're doing a great job at advocating for themselves because they're going through something really, really tough. So, and sometimes people do need to hear that because it might feel like your world is completely upside down, but somebody telling you like, hey, you're actually dealing with this really well, like when it seems that chaotic, can be a really assuring thing. You okay?
So I guess in a way, I guess what we can do to help, I guess, our surroundings is to give people assurance and tell them that they're doing wrong.
Absolutely.
I feel like not nowadays too. It's not. Maybe people don't just straight up say that to her. I appreciate your actions.
Right. And a lot of people don't, when they walk into a situation like this, they're guilting themselves for staying in a situation or even for second guessing themselves. I've had people from all walks of life that I've worked with, people that don't have a dime to their name, people that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Unfortunately, domestic violence, it doesn't discriminate against any race, gender, monetary amount that you make. It does not discriminate at all. So it's recognizing that asking for help is probably the most difficult part, is walking through these actual doors and meeting with somebody when you're in that moment. Like it is not an easy thing to do. So I always explain to people that it's very important that they ask for that assistance. And just by doing that's a huge first step. So.
And so I'm just trying to read more questions. Tell me about difficult work situation and how you overcame it.
Well, there's been a handful.
That's right.
I guess like any of the situations that we've been in, whether it's like a highly disgruntled client, an abuser showing up, this place has a lot of different safety guards in effect. We work together a lot as a team. So even if it's something that one-on-one, you had like a client, I've had clients that they get very frustrated that they might feel that you're not doing anything to help them. And it can be frustrating because like we can offer what resources we have. And unfortunately, sometimes that's all we have to offer. Our shelter might be full, other surrounding area shelters might be full, and they're still wondering, where am I supposed to go with my couple of children? And they might even, I've been yelled at before by people telling me, the best you could do in that situation is recognize that it's because they're in a moment of conflict and trauma in their life, that it's not a personal attack on you. It's just that they're in an emergency situation and they're frustrated. Sometimes it doesn't feel the best to be on the receiving end of that, but part of what we do here is I can debrief with my boss, I can debrief with coworkers and explain to them like, this is what I went through, and they will sit there and talk it through. So it's a very supportive work environment that way. And recognizing that you might be dealing with people who aren't in their best moments. That's unfortunately what happens when you're working with people in trauma.
So yeah, a few more questions.
Okay.
So what are some things that you feel are important to know when working with someone from the domestic abuse population?
I think one of the most important things to realize is that, that people are definitely, they've already experienced trauma. So there's going to be some mental health concerns, even, it's not always physical, and the mental health part of it is the longest lasting effects. It's going to take them the longest to heal from. Also, always maintaining that open door policy. So making sure that the way that you're approaching any appointment with them just gives them a very welcoming feeling. So if for whatever reason in the future they need to come back and utilize services, that they're more apt to come than not, because if they're made to not feel welcome, they're not going to come and utilize resources, especially if they keep going to that revolving door of getting back in, either with the same person or an additional, because a lot of times it'll go that way too. They might leave one person and then jump into another relationship with someone who has the same tendencies. So it's recognizing that that help is always there.
So right now you just mentioned that people often jump from one relationship to another relationship. So in your opinion, do you think that's because they have not reflected on the self, or I guess take an overview of their own traumas or experiences? That's why they're, or that I guess not. I don't want to sound rude, but I guess immature wise, or like I'm saying immature because they have not. They're I guess in a way taking the easy way out instead of taking time to reflect themselves. So I guess I don't know the phrase. I guess immature in a way that they see. They're not mature enough to take on time to reflect themselves first and then just seeking validation or yes.
And I think that's a good point, is seeking validation. Right, and it's, I don't feel like it's, I think it's probably more that it's not an immaturity. It's that everyone kind of takes their own time to process healing. So it might be a situation that, no, yes. How late is a little late? I'm gonna pass, I'm in the middle of an appointment right now, so I know that clients are showing up already. I'm gonna have to get Camille on the phone to answer that because I can't. Yeah, I know, she's up because I don't have anyone else there to receive people at the door right now, so, okay, I'm gonna put you on hold. I don't even know where to transfer that to. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
Well, are you here for children's group?
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to go down and give Camille a hand right now, we
Okay,
already
yeah.
have people showing up.
Okay, sorry. I didn't realize.
Okay, thanks for holding. Are you still on the other line with her? Okay, basically Camille's response was that if she's any more late than 10 minutes after 6, that she will have to wait until next week. Yeah, normally it's 5 after 6, but she said she'd give her till 10 after. All right, thank you. Bye. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. It's alright. So, have you experienced any inequities or unfairness in your personal life or in the field? If so, could you explain a little more about it?
I think the biggest one, like I said, the inequities was recognizing that like working with Spanish speaking clients. Same with like we're very lucky that we have a few people here that are Hmong and can interpret for people. But that is definitely something that we have to pull people from other spots when there's court injunctions, even though that's not necessarily their job. But it's helpful to make sure that the clients are getting, the communication that they deserve. They deserve to know what's going on. And I didn't really realize we had a situation where I had done a restraining order with a client, and they knew where the courthouse was, so I explained to them the process, sent them down there, and then we received a phone call from the courthouse saying, like, how dare you send a Spanish-speaking client here with no translator? Had no idea that they were relying on us to show up. So now from here forward, because they did not file that restraining order for that woman, and then I could not get in touch with that person. So they have no answer on what took place with that scenario. It's always in the back of my mind, like, because she has some pretty heightened safety concerns, that would have been really important for her to have. So now I make sure that I have the time frame. I, no matter what, will go down to the courthouse with Spanish-speaking clients and pull my phone out and dial our number in for a translator, and I'm there every step of the way with them, because I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to be in that position and have absolutely no understanding of what's taking place just because of a language barrier. So I would say that's probably one of it. And I understand, like, at least we've implemented things that assist with that. But I did not realize until I was faced with that scenario that, you can be here and be a citizen here, and or even fighting to be a citizen here. And if you don't speak English, like, it seems like a lot of doors get closed in your face. So I'm grateful that we were able to maintain and make certain things happen for people.
So regarding language based translator, so if the client does not want a translator,
If they do not want one,
yeah.
if we don't have a means of communicating with them, there's not really much we can do with that situation at that point. We can provide other resources for them in the area, like at the Mom Center or the, oh goodness, sorry, I'm like looking at your phone. But there's different resources. There's an African American center. There is Casa Alba Melanie, which is a Hispanic resource center. So if they feel more comfortable working with somebody directly through there, that's what we'll at least try to do, is point them in the direction for something that they would feel more comfortable with.
And so lastly, do you have any other personal information you wish to discuss? And so what are they?
Any other
Other side? Do you have any personal information you wish to discuss? And so what are they?
I mean, I think I touched base with some of it, really. Like I say to people, just pick something that you're passionate about. That would be the biggest thing. This is something I'm very passionate about, and I am very proud. Like, it isn't my overall end goal, but I'm very grateful to be where I am and the experiences that I've learned while being here. It makes work seem like not work as much. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is work. Like, and it can be very stressful, but at the end of the day, it's a very heartfelt position, and I recognize that I'm helping people, and that anybody that's joining the human services, like schooling program, anything along those lines, the basis is helping people. So like I said, I'm very, very grateful to be in the position that I can do that.
So you mentioned that you had an end goal.
Yes.
End goal. So what is the end goal?
Well, I shouldn't even say like an overall end goal.
Yeah.
I'm going to just keep adding goals. So I do intend upon being here for a stint of time, but I do plan on going back to school for my master's degree. Eventually, I've always had it in my heart that I would like to be an instructor for classes. Whether that it might be part-time. I might be a full-time employee here, but be able to get my foot in the door over at NWTC. Who knows, maybe I could be teaching under Shelley. So, yeah, it's always important to maintain additional goals. It's a very big confidence booster as I've made the steps along the way, and it doesn't matter what age you are. I could care less if you're 17 and starting some college classes while you're in high school, because I did that, and those credits still qualified for my degree years later, and I didn't sign up for a program until I was 37. So 20 years later, those credits still coming. They can't take that education away from you. So anybody, I don't care, you could be 70 and you could be starting school at that point. It's all worthwhile.
That's all the questions I have for
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Not a problem. Thank you.